Hi, I'm Gaby Colletta. Welcome to a tutorial on Bakasana crow pose, the arm balance. So before we start exploring ways to get in, I recommend grabbing 2 bricks as they might support your endeavor of the pose. And let's break down the pose. So it's an arm balance, which means that we're going to be placing weight on our wrists. So we want our wrists to be strong. Some ways to prepare can be doing different wrist exercises and stretches, or even in something like a down dog, just being really mindful of where you're putting the weight on your wrist. This part of the wrist is much stronger than the outer side. So if you're planting your hands down and then your hands are kind of favoring the outside, it'll be a little more challenging and maybe even more painful. You'll have that kind of sensation of dumping into the wrists. So we really want to try to think of rooting into the L of the hands, or even rooting into the entire circumference of the palm, and imagining the center of the palm is like a suction cup pulling up. And you can do that just as you're moving through your flow or even holding down dog. But we want to give a lot of love to our wrists. We also want to use the stacking of the joints to help find more ease in the pose. So what I mean by that is, as we start to get into the arm balance, if your elbow is back here, or we're balancing over here, this is going to be a lot harder. It's going to require more strength in the body versus having chaturanga arms and the elbow stacked over the wrists. So something to keep in mind. The last part is core work. So doing abdominals, core work can be a really great way to help ease arm balances in general. So when we want to get into Bakasana, we're going to find those chaturanga arms. So spread the hands, root into the L of the hands. We want to be mindful not to splay the elbows out, but really wrap the elbows back towards the back of the mat. And I like to approach it with a little support of a brick. Sometimes our hips, this is like where a lot of center of gravity is. So if our hips aren't high enough, it just might pull us out of it. We won't get into it. So I like to step up on a brick, really spread the hands, wrap the elbows back, and I start to lean forward, planting some weight into the L of the hands. My knees are going to come to the outer armpits and hug in. That kind of helps from the splaying of the arms, and it just kind of helps with core. So start to lean forward, and now that my hips are up high, I'm kind of getting some leverage here. This can help. I can just hold Bakasana with my toes on the brick, or I can even play with one foot off and then the next foot. Sometimes there can be a really sincere fear of falling forward on your face. Trust me, I've been there. A few things you can do: place a blanket. You can also place the brick in front of your head. I don't use this tactic as much, but other people have enjoyed it. And so what happens is you can kind of use your forehead as a counterbalance on the brick. Another thing people sometimes kind of like to play with is actually arm balancing with your hands on the bricks. Elbows wrap back, chaturanga, so we want that 90-degree bend, and then hug everything in. I kind of find this a little harder, to be honest. So those are a few ways to kind of play with getting into Bakasana. I'm going to give you one more option. So another variation of Malasana, garland pose, is to have your big toes together and knees out. I'm using this as a preparatory phase to get into Bakasana. I'll reach my arms forward and kind of lean back. And I'm going to imagine my arms like a little pitchfork coming in underneath the shins and the knees to kind of scoop my shins up, okay? And so sometimes this can be another really nice and tight way to get into Bakasana. So big toes touch, knees splayed out, drawing the elbows in like a little pitchfork to come underneath. Rise onto the tippy toes. Keep hugging the elbows back and start to lean forward. And again, you can play with one toe off, maybe both toes. And if you're in it, then really squeeze everything in. So these are just a few tips Feel free to play around, see what works, and comment below if something was helpful or if you need a little more support. Happy to offer that.